It's been a massive week of athletics here at Sydney Olympic Park Athletics Centre. We've had the Australian Junior Athletics Championships and the Sydney Track Classic last night, one of the grand finals of the Australian Athletics Tour and in the lead internationals. The club has been very well represented here this weekend and it's been some great success. 10 medals this week, including 5 national champions, and it's just been a tremendously pleasing result for the club. We'll start with the Sydney Track Classic last night, and the club had 3 athletes representing it. Jack Hicking was the first one up in the men's pole vault. It's been a pretty disappointing season for Jack. He's been struggling coming back from a back injury, and that's been pretty well documented in some of these wrap-ups at State Opens and the Hunter Track Classic. The good news last night was that he was back to a 16-step run-up, which is where he needs to be in his search for World Championship qualification. But he did. He still struggle to get to the sort of heights that he'd want to be at. He did clear first jump at 4 metres 90, and also his second jump at 5 metres 5. He cleared at his first clearance, but they put the bar up to 5:20, and he was unable to clear that at any of his 3 attempts. So it's a bit short of what he would have wanted to have jumped, but still pleasing to get a height on the board after no hiding at State Opens. He was pretty frustrated after that, so I'm sure he'll be pleased just to get a height in the bank and to get a decent performance in the books. Obviously, he's still building. He'll be at Nationals in Brisbane in a couple of weeks' time as he looks to qualify for the World Championships in August. Although I must say that height of 5:65 qualification standard does look to be a way away at this point, but I'm sure Zusra will have him in the best possible preparation to try and make that height. Isaac Niamoa also ran the 100 metres last night as part of the Sydney Track Classic. Isaac's also had an average season. He's had some good runs, but he certainly hasn't set the world on fire. He was back in a bit of form last night. He ran 10.42 to run third into a 0.3 headwind, so a relatively pleasing time there. And again, he's heading to Melbourne and to Nationals in Brisbane, where he'll be chasing the World Championships qualifier of 10.16. The third runner last night at the Track Classic was Lisa Celli. I think it was the third time in about 3 weeks that she's been the happiest person in Australia. You'll recall that at State Opens she ran her first PB in about 5 years in the 400 metre hurdles. That was lowering her PB from about 61.08 to a 60.9 and was the first time she'd broken 61 seconds. If you thought she was happy then, you should have seen her after the final when she ran 59.51 to drop 1.4 seconds off a PB, and she was positively stoked with that. Also thrilled last night at the Track Classic. She was fourth in a very competitive field behind the very good Australian Lauren Wells and also the American who was out here, Cassandra Tate. So she ran 59.45 last night, wiping another 0.06 of a second off a PB, but very importantly getting under that 59.5 barrier for the first time. She's had that on a wall at home for about 3 years now as a time to break, so she was absolutely stoked after the race, and deservedly so. There are a few people moving back to the juniors that we haven't spoken about this weekend. Sina Wildrott, she's run some big PBs lately in the 200 metres flat and the 800 metres at Little A's regionals and all comers respectively. She was a little bit disappointed with a run in the 400 hurdles this weekend. She was about 2.5 seconds away from a PB. But having said that, it's a national championship. It'll be a very good experience for her, and I'm sure she'll be better for the run. Bryony Norton was 7th in a time of 7:24 in the 2,000 metre steeple. I don't have any info at the moment on whether that was a PB or not, but the same story as Sina. She's going to be all the better for a run in front of a big crowd at a national championship with the best runners in Australia, so she'll only take improvement out of that. The people that we have mentioned, of course, we spoke to Lindsay Watson about Hamish Wallace the other night in the 5,000 metres. Again, that run being delayed about 12 hours to Thursday morning on account of the thunderstorm. He was pretty disappointed. His PB of 15.09, that would have put him second in the national title. He was a mile off that at 16.41. Clearly something isn't right there in his preparation, so I'm sure he and Lindsay will be looking at that as they move ahead to the winter season and what will hopefully be a big year in the cross country and road running. We also talked about Trent Glenn. He ran a PB in the steeplechase on Wednesday night, again on the back of a very ordinary warm-up on account of the thunderstorm delay. He lowered his PB from 6:39 to 6:34, so about a 5-second PB. And even though he was looking to run a little bit faster than that, you can't be disappointed with a personal best. And again, he'll only take improvement out of that. He didn't run the 3,000 metres that he was due to compete in on account of having the cold that he got earlier in the week in the lead-up. Pretty unfortunate, and again, that would have hampered him a bit in the steeplechase, but there was no point risking getting any crooker by running the 3,000 metres in circumstances where he was very unlikely to run a good time in any event. Nathan Brown also in the steeplechase on Wednesday night, another one of Lindsay's guys. As we said in our interview with Lindsay, he was clearly feeling the effects of spending 8 weeks in France with no training. But nonetheless, Lindsay wanted him out here running in a national title on a big stage and just to get back into some racing. Hopefully all those guys are going to take a fair bit of growth out of this weekend into a big winter season as the club tries to defend its state championship. And while the under-20 boys try to defend their respective team state title, it's shaping up to be a pretty strong team. Lindsay also had Andrew Shannon in the 200 metre hurdles, who we spoke about the other night. He ran a 0.2 second PB in the hurdles. Again, he's 13 years old, running in an under-15s event. He's probably the youngest person in the race by a long way. And a lot of those boys are a lot bigger and stronger than him, just given their age. He's going to grow, he's going to get a lot bigger and stronger, and both Lindsay and Belinda Cosgrove, who've had involvement with him, are both very confident that he's going to grow out of that run and become quite a force to be reckoned with as he gets to be some of the older people in that age division. But let's talk about the medalists from the Australian juniors. Michael Connemani continued a tremendous season. Obviously the state junior champion and third at the state opens, like we talked about, a PB there of 10.57. He was coming in here feeling pretty good. But I must say, it was a bit disappointing not to see him in the race with Jack Hale and Jordan Shelley. Those two guys forced to run down in the under-18s in the interest of getting World Youth qualifiers. Unfortunately, they didn't get those this afternoon on the back of big illegal tailwinds. But nonetheless, that would have been really something to see the 4 or 5 big guys in Australia up against each other. Nonetheless, he did race Trey Williams and Rowan Browning, who have been on the national circuit this year and part of that gang of 4 that have really taken national sprinting by storm. He ran 10.62 in the final. I think if you'd asked him before the race, he would have said that Trey Williams unquestionably start favourite, but that Rowan Browning probably was likely to beat him as well. He beat Browning pretty decisively. Again, it was an ordinary start, but he ran very well during the run to run 10.62, only half a tenth outside his personal best, notwithstanding that he missed the start and a silver medal at the Australian Juniors, and he was absolutely stoked. That all but caps off a brilliant season for him. He's going to head up to Nationals in a couple of weeks' time, racing with the big guys in the Opens. That'll be a huge challenge for him. With any luck, we expect him to make the semis and he'll be an outside chance of making the final, but that's just going to be a great experience for him running in the Open division against the big boys, and we'll follow that with keen interest. Alec Newen, a guy who has won more Australian All-Schools medals than I care to remember. He was another medalist this weekend at Australian Juniors. He won a bronze medal in the under-17s 200 metres. He probably hasn't been running quite at his best, but nonetheless very pleased to come away with a bronze medal. He also ran the 100 metre heat this morning. Reasonable time, and he made the final. Unfortunately, he was 7th in the final. Never really looked like challenging the top guys after about the halfway mark. Ran a time of 11.22, which is pretty handy. But having said that, again, the massive tailwind, 4.3 in his race, so that will be an illegal time. But obviously the big story of the weekend are our Australian junior champions. 5 of them this weekend. A tremendously pleasing result for the club. Travis Beluga was the first one. He ran the 4x100 metre relay final for New South Wales. He was also third in the 200 metres in a time of 26.41, and that was also into a minus 1.8 tailwind. That final was actually a dead heat, both of the front guys running 25.67. he actually had a shocking heat this morning. It was really uncharacteristic, really struggled, only just fell into the final. I think it was the slowest qualifier, but more than made up for himself in the heat in the final this afternoon. It was a brilliant run to run third and a bronze medal in national championship for him to go with his gold in the relay. Speaking of the relay, there were some pretty questionable relay baton changes there for New South Wales in the under-14s, but they're all pretty young. They're learning this stuff. They don't get to run together very often, so nonetheless, it's a gold medal. It's an Australian championship, and they'll be stoked with that. I was speaking to Matty Lynch last night, who does a bit of work with that squad, and he was tremendously pleased with them. Another one of our national champions this weekend was David Chen in the long jump. He's trained by Tad at Bankstown Little A's, and another pleasing one to have come up from the Little Athletics Club to the seniors. He jumped 7.11 metres to become the national champion. And obviously that's tremendously pleasing for both the Little Athletics Club and ourselves. Ed Trippus was the huge story of Wednesday night. They were talking between 6 and 6:05. He ran 5:59 to win the Australian junior title. It was just a tremendous run. It was a pleasure to watch. He went to the front and with about 400 to go and never looked back. They were worried about the Kiwi athlete early in the day, but he absolutely ran them down. And then after he went to the front, never looked like getting beat. Beth Croft was the other really heartwarming story of the weekend. She was also in the 3,000 metre steeplechase. She ran another 10:29 on the back of that same time at the Bankstown Invitational to win the Australian junior title. She went to the front a long way out. She had about a K to go, and once again never looked back. She was a bit concerned about getting run down, but once she went to the front, they never really looked like getting her. Lindsay Watson was pretty confident that she'd hang on, and she did, and did it well. She's only a couple of seconds away from the World Junior qualifier. She's got about a year to do it, and you'd imagine that if someone like a Victoria Mitchell or a couple of the top open girls give her a lead in one of these meets, she's going to go very, very close to running that World Junior qualifier. But undoubtedly for me, the star athlete of the weekend, Jessica Hull. This was her last national championship as a junior, and she ran both the 1,500 metres, which is her pet event, and also the 800 metres against some specialist 800 girls. In the 1,500, she ran 4:32 in the heat, essentially coasted through. But then in the final, in what was pretty clearly a tactical move, they obviously had their plan with her and her dad, who's a coach. With about 700 to go, she went to the front and never looked like getting run down. She did stiffen up a bit late in the race, but they were never a realistic chance of getting her. 4:24 in the final. It was not a PB. She ran a PB 4:20 at State Opens, but she's obviously tremendously pleased with that to win the national title. She also ran the 800 metres. She had to go pretty hard in the heat. Again, against some specialist 800 metres in a tough heat. Second in the heat, and in a 2:07, which is a personal best for the 800 metres, so that's how hard she was going. She was the fourth fastest qualifier for the final, and probably wasn't expected to win. She settled pretty close to the back in the final, and had to work pretty late the last 200 metres, but it was a barnstorming run home. She ran 2:08, so the time not quite as fast, but it was a slow first lap in the final. But nonetheless, a gold and a bronze medal for Jessica at the National Championships, and she'll be tremendously pleased with that as she heads off to China for the World Cross Country. That'll be a first taste of going away with a part senior team, and that'll be just tremendous for her development, as no doubt she looks towards a good winter season and the Rio Olympics in 2016. But that's the story of the weekend. We're wrapping up here at SOPAC. 10 medals for the Bankstown Sports Athletics Club at the National Juniors, including 5 new Australian National Junior champions. It's been a great week of athletics here. The Track Classic was fantastic, and we'll look forward to bringing you the Nationals from Brisbane and some news from the Melbourne Track Classic. Cheers.